Welcome to Packet Exchange, our topic, network automation today. Of course, we're going to continue our series, work on our script a bit more. But first, I have a letter from Bob, the young engineer, who sent me a direct message on InstaTwitBook, and he says as follows. I had a big network change to do in the middle of the night, and the change approval board said it was good to go for this maintenance window, and I didn't want to come into the office in the middle of the night, because screw that. So I wrote a script that would send all the commands for the change to all the devices, and then I scheduled a cron job, and the cron job was going to kick off at 2 in the morning, and I stayed home and went to sleep. Woohoo! What could possibly go wrong? And then at 2:15, I get a call from the NOC saying that a bunch of stuff went red on the big screen. It had been that way since 2 in the morning, and I went into the office and I fixed it all, but I don't know about this automation stuff, Banks. Seems like it's crap to me. All right, Bob, what did you do wrong? Number one, you did a script with no sanity checking. How do I know? Because if you've been following my guidelines so far, we haven't even got to that part. So you wrote a bunch of scripts that sent a bunch of commands and did a bunch of things, but you didn't do all the things that you should have been doing along the way to make sure that each command you send is a good one, the responses you get back make sense, and then proceeding in a common sense way within your script. I'm going to guess you didn't do that, Bob, did you? No, probably not. Number two, you did a great, big, crazy, massive change in production with read-write scripts, and have you really got your read-only scripts working that well? If you're new to this, you haven't. And going read-write with automation is a scary step that you should only be taking once you are extremely competent with read-only. You've defined your workflows very, very well. You've done tons and tons of testing, and the changes that you're doing, the read-write changes that you're doing via automation, are not huge changes. You want to be doing little incremental changes along the way. So Bob, I'm sorry, man. This one's on you. Automation is not something you just do what we've done so far, write a bunch of commands, send them, and then things all happen magically. You got a lot of building blocks to learn and put into your building blocks that you put in your toolbox. Got a lot of tools, Bob. There you go. You got a lot of tools you got to get to put in your toolbox before you start doing anything read-write with network automation. Okay, let's move on to our next segment. In our next segment, we are going to look at the script that we've been building the last couple of weeks, where we're parsing out MAC addresses, and we're going to get into this in a little more detail, looking at that structured data we talked about last time, and breaking it up in such a way that we can get a report that looks kind of nice out of it and is kind of useful to us. Let's build on our structured data discussion from last week and format some of the data that we are gathering from the CLI in our MAC address list and kind of make a report out of it. Let's see what we can do here. Here's our network topology. We've got some Ubuntu Docker containers that have got IP addresses. I've just used them to give the bridging table some interesting stuff. And let's run our report and see what we get. We're going to walk through the script in a second here. I've done some updates from last week with printing and going into the structured data that we get from the ntc-templates and then formatting them on the screen to give us this output. So look at that. We've got a dashed line and some headers and then a bunch of rows that are outputting what the switch gave us, only outputting it in our own way instead of what the CLI gave us as a blob. How did we do this? Let's take a look at the script. Very little is changed in this script from last week except for what I've added beginning in line 32. Line 32 shows a bunch of print statements and a for statement. In Python, a print statement does what you think it does. It prints things. It prints to the, in this case, to the screen, and it prints strings. Why do I say strings? Because maybe not integers, just depending on what it is that you're printing. When you're mixing data types, strings and integers like a number, well, programs care about that stuff. It wants to know that the data it's working with is an integer or a string. And so you're going to see that we are working in these print statements with strings, and in fact, if we try to give one of these print statements an integer when everything else is a string, we're going to have to convert that integer to a string first. So we're printing a bunch of strings, and the strings are made up of a few different things. If you look at the various print lines that are there, they're handily color-coded in the editor I happen to be using. Literals are green. They're in between single quote apostrophes, and they are colored green. So we are literally printing what is in between the apostrophes, the single quotes, to the screen. Some stuff is like a pink-purple color. Those are values that have been escaped. There's a backslash in front of them telling Python, hey, I want you to do something special with this character that comes after the backslash. So treat it in a special way. And again, the color code is pink. So you might notice in line 35, backslash single quote. That's telling Python, hey, print a literal single quote out to the screen. Don't use the single quote to end the section of string and end that block. We want to actually print an apostrophe, a single quote out to the screen. /n, you'll notice, like at the end of line 36, that's an extra new line character. There's one that's printed at the end of every print statement by default, and if we add our own /n, that tells Python, hey, print another new line character. Okay, so let's walk through the rest of this. So you should be able to understand pretty easily what lines 33 and 34 are doing, just printing literal strings out. Line 35, it says I sent the, and the pink apostrophe there, meaning literally that's going to get put out. And then we've got this plus, v_cli_command plus. When you see a plus sign in a print statement, it's called concatenation. You are taking the string before it and the string after that and combining them together, concatenating them. So v_cli_command is a variable. What does it contain? It contains the value that we set earlier in the script. Then we are printing more in green, literal stuff to the screen there. And then at the end of line 35, we say network_device, square bracket, single quote host, single quote, close square bracket. Well, that seems kind of cryptic. What's all that? Hey, we are referencing a specific value in the dictionary network_device. Now, maybe you don't remember from last week, so let's scroll back up and look at line 10. Network_device equals, and then we define these 4 values that make up this dictionary. The host key has a value of 172.22.46.1. So what we are saying then in line 35 is that we want to reference the value found at the host key in the dictionary network_device. And so that's what's going to get printed. Let's pause there for a second and take a look at our output just to kind of put those back together. Hello, Automator. I sent the show MAC address table command to the network device at 172.22.46.1. Just go that far looking at the output. Where did we get that output from? From the lines 33, 34, and 35. So let's look at line 36. Just a couple of functions I want to point out. Line 36 outputs there are 10 results. Well, how did we get those values? Well, there are is a literal. Then we see str, which converts anything that follows after it into a string, which again, we need that. It's got to be a string value for the print statement to be happy with it, since everything else in the print statement is a string. Then what is string str converting into a string for us? It's converting whatever len parentheses CLI_output_structured spits back into it. Well, what is len? Well, it is a function in Python that tells us how many items are in a list. CLI_output_structured has got a whole bunch of rows in it, 1 row for every, in this case, MAC address that the CLI spit back to us, right? But it's in an integer format. Str converts it into a string and then prints it out. And in this case, that value is 10, as in there are 10 results. And then we're printing the literal word results, ... and going on to the new line from there. Cool. Now we get into another interesting bit. Take a look at lines 38 through 41. What is that? That is a looping structure. It begins with 4. 4 is a command that says, hey, Python, you're going to repeat the next few lines that come below until you get through whatever we're looping through here. So in this case, we're saying for row in CLI_output_structured. Well, what is CLI output structured? It's a list. Every row in the list then is one time that the loop is going to execute. If we got 4 rows, the for loop will execute 4 times. We got 104 rows, the loop will execute 104 times. What then is getting executed by the for loop? The values that are indented underneath. So in this case, lines 39 through 41. Really, there's just two lines there. If you look at 40 and 41, it's just one print statement, but the print statement was so long that I broke it up over two lines. That's a thing that Python lets you do. You can actually spread a command over two lines. So there are two lines then, two commands that are going to get executed in this for loop. Line 39, we are doing something called sequence equals and then setting it to some value. Well, what have we done here? I want to know in each iteration of the loop what row we're working on. I got the index of the row. An index of the row, like in a spreadsheet, right? If you go look at a spreadsheet and you look at the rows over to the left side of that spreadsheet, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? That's the index. I wanted to get the index number of the row that we're working from. And Python has for the list object a .index method that we can ask and say, hey, I want to know what row we're working on here. So for row is defined in 38, so that row becomes the thing, the object we're working on for this iteration of the loop. I run the .index method against the current row. It gives me back a value, a number, which row are we on, and assigns it to the variable sequence. In line 40, then, I use that right at the beginning. I convert that integer that's stored in sequence into a string with the str function, and then print a bunch of other stuff. And that bunch of other stuff makes up the rest of each row. Let's go back and look at our output again to review before we walk through lines 40 and 41 in more detail. If you look at line 0 there, you see the number 0 dot space MAC colon, and then the MAC address, the VLAN, and the interface. I've broken out these three values for each row, and then plus assigned that sequence number on the front of each row. All right, how did we get those? Row destination underscore address. That's right in the middle of line 40 there. You see that? What are we saying? We're saying, hey, row equals a dictionary, right? Because each row, each in the list, contains a little dictionary that the parse underscore output up in line 30 broke out for us. I want the value stored in destination underscore address of the current row, the current dictionary that we are looking at during this loop. What is that value? That value is, in this case, is the value that ends in .4241. That's what it pulled out. Just like if we go back up to line 10, network device, that dictionary, the host key had a value of 172.22.46.1. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. We are going to the destination underscore address key, pulling the value out, and then we're printing it. That's what we're printing. We're doing the same thing with the VLAN key, and we're doing the same thing with the destination underscore port key as we continue down this print statement and wrap around to line 41. And that is how each of these values are referenced and then printed to the screen. I'm telling Python, hey, I want you to look in this part of the list via the row based on the iteration of the for loop we're going through. And then I want you to look at a specific key in the dictionary that's stored in that row to find that value. Got it? Got it. Okay, I hope you got it, because it's pretty important as we go through in Python understanding how to get at data that's in lists and dictionaries. It's definitely a core competency. So your key takeaways for today are, number one, the print statement. You're going to use it all the time. Here's the thing, if you're using Python 2 and then you move to Python 3, the syntax is different between print statements. So get a handle on that. You want to be using Python 3. Another takeaway, looping structures. We looked at the for statement and used for to loop through items in a list. There's all kinds of looping structures and things that you can do with loops. So if you want to dig into that, go Google Python and looping structures or Python and the for statement and read up. See what you can find out and do some experimenting. Your last takeaway for today is the word concatenation. So when you are joining strings together with that plus sign, like we're doing in the print statements here in this script, you are concatenating. That's a term that you're going to see in programming a good bit, and they talk about rules around concatenation and having to get the syntax right and so on. And yeah, we'll call it there. We'll call it there for this week. And join us next week. We're going to dig into this in even more detail because, of course, some of you have been asking me, when are we going to be able to do more than one device at a time? And and so on. Well, we'll get there. We'll get there. We're building up to it, right? We're going a little bit at a time, but we're going to get there and generate more interesting reports. And I'm shutting up now. We're going to stop. So many more things I've got. We're going to be covering. See you later.